Okay, people, we went from doom scrolling to doom prompting. AI can make you smarter right up till the point where you're managing too many outputs. There was a paper that showed that AI is not eliminating decisions. It just changes the type, right? So you might be making fewer executive decisions, but a lot more judgment calls, like whether to trust it, whether to verify it, do I override it? And those meta decisions, those like small decisions, those micro decisions can actually be more cognitively expensive.
On today's episode of Building Agents, I had the pleasure of interviewing Lauren Waldman, who is a learning scientist and the founder of Learning Pirate, who helps people understand how their brains actually work, especially under pressure, overload, and rapid technological change. So in the conversation, she brings a sharp, human-centered lens to AI and argues that while AI can offload execution, it cannot offload evaluation. And that the real cost of modern work is often cognitive load, context switching, and decision fatigue. She speaks from both research and lived experience, blending neuroscience, learning, burnout recovery, and a deep care for human connection into a perspective that feels both rigorous and deeply grounded. Enjoy.
What happens to human brains when agents start doing the thinking for you, right? We just talked about the difference between tech and humanity. Everyone in my world is building with agents. The agents make decisions and you're parsing through that knowledge. And then you produce deliverables and you're running pipelines overnight and you're getting results in the morning. But nobody's asking the person like you who studies cognition whether we're trading capability for convenience.
I think it comes down to, and I wanted to do a little bit of research on this because, the sort of line between what's happening with AI and with us, it's still very new. Not the use of AI, but the research on what it is actually doing in our cognition. And it really, two words kind of kept coming up, and it was the different modes at play, which is, are we executing or are we evaluating? So AI can offload the execution, but it doesn't offload the evaluation. And I think the evaluation is more cognitively expensive.
Every time you're going through a problem, the agent provides some form of feedback. So I'm working through a problem. It asks me 17 questions with regards to something, and I need to use my judgment for every single one of those.
Yeah.
You're saying that is the tax. That is the thing that's using my energy up.
Yeah.
Why? Why? Please enlighten me.
I mean, it's almost as if, AI can make you smarter right up till the point where you're managing too many outputs. And then your brain has to start shifting, right? From thinking deeply to just keeping up. And I think that's where the quality starts to drop. But in that evaluation piece, so let's take, one of the things that we had talked about is like you run 44 agents, which is like already like the mind blown emoji like just instantly pops up in my head. So what we're really getting to is, the cognitive load, working memory. So cognitive load isn't how much the brain can take in at one time. It's really governed by memory and the process of memory, more specifically working memory, which is very limited in time and capacity. So you're constantly context switching, reviewing. I think in one of the examples you gave, it's like one was an agent for a cheese factory versus an automotive company. Like those are very two different things. So if we looked at that example, right? It's like every time you switch from like the cheese factory, I keep wanting to see cheesecake. Do you hear what like my you put the word factory in there, my schema is going cheesecake factory. But you're switching from that to like the automotive compliance, and your brain, when we think about what it has to do, it's got to change the mental model from one of those to the other, load a completely different one up. So I'm not talking about cheese anymore. I got to think about automotives, and then reconstruct the context and then the goal and the constraints and the quality standards. And that rebuilding process is going to lean heavily on the working memory, which, like I said, is very limited. So I think that each of the criteria are going to have has like a different criteria of good. each domain, excuse me, has a different
Yeah.
criteria. And when you switch rapidly like that, your brain is going to start blending standards. So you might unconsciously apply like let's just say like the startup speed thinking, right? And that then we could over scrutinize. It might not be good enough. But if you're constantly in that evaluation mode, it's exhausting. That's heavy cognitive lifting on the executive function, your prefrontal cortex. And when we look at even like the research on focus, right? It's how long can someone really sustain deep focus? And I think the last piece of I'd have to pull it up. I think it was 90 minutes at max, and that's even seems like a long time. If you think about that, 90 minutes would be, if anyone could achieve that with like pure focus without task switching or attention getting drifted. That's pretty damn impressive these days. I think at most we could all sit down for 20 to 30 minutes before we're thinking about what's the weather going to be tomorrow.
One of the things that came to my head, right, while listening to you, is the parallels I draw between how I manage agents and what you just described. In the sense that the context switching is actually what costs the most when I'm working. Like, imagine I have 4 of those agents open, and each of them has a different stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
And if I, for some reason, pollute one of them with a sidetrack, the impact on the results is enormous. Like, and so to give you an example, I have one of my agents that just builds websites, and I've got like a bunch of people in my community. I'm giving them websites, and it's just like, okay, here's here's the website, here's the context, here's the person, do the thing. Now, I had one of them, I was very tired. I think it was 9 p.m. So the way I do these things is I send these to be done in the cloud overnight. So it takes like 3-4 hours. I don't need to think about it. I have something in the morning, but I had done it in the wrong chat window. And it was, if I remember correctly, it was a context about some form of database infrastructure discussion about how am I storing all these memories. And then I gave it the goal of making a website with regards to, I think it was wedding ceremonies. And it made something which was very odd. Because it had these like, it's as if you asked someone who was a data scientist to make a website about wedding ceremonies, and it was extremely well structured, but absolutely not emotional.
Right.
And it was very interesting to see that the LLM could not context switch either, because it had all this previous log. And the way LLMs are working is every time you've got this like conversation, it's passing through the entire conversation back through the loop every single time. And so by the end of it, it was completely, it was funny because it still produced a wedding website, but as if it was written by a data scientist. Like, do you feel like this applies to humans as well, in the sense that a lot of AI builders I know are generalists, and they're doing things, and they've got ideas everywhere? And is AI a superpower for them, or is it more just something that allows them to feel more productive?
Ooh, that's a delicious question. I mean, I think there's two sides to this. There's that feeling of productivity because how fast the output is. But what comes after? That's the question. I think sort of the theme to this conversation is probably going to be those two modes at play, which is the execution, that's the fast part, the evaluation. And you've got to look at it, you've got to validate it, you've got to see what it's doing, right? So it's, when we look at how the brain organizes information through schemas, like organizational frameworks in the brain are called schemas. And it's, some people in the learning industry, they know what a scaffold, and we build upon. What's really interesting about the example that you gave with the wedding site is that what schema was at play here, right? You had the sort of the mind of a data scientist, but then you have weddings, which, you know, like you said, they're emotional, and there's a different element to that. I don't think people equate in the schema of a wedding, data scientist, wedding planner, more like it.
Yeah.
So that, you know, there's that disconnect between those organizational frameworks, which means then how is your brain switching from one to the other so quickly? And do we expect that there's not going to be elements of fault then? Well, of course there's going to be. But that means that we have to then exude more executive function to focus, to validate, and to go through and do that evaluation piece. And that is, I think at some point, once you reach a certain level of exhaustion, I think like everybody who's listening to this probably has at one point, you just kind of get to the point of like, I just want this over with. And imagine what you're missing when your mind is in that set.
Yeah. Is there anything like you can do for yourself to like allow? I'm gonna like, of course, stopping, taking care of yourself, meditation, things like that have come to mind. But are there things you can do in the moment to give yourself that breathing room to focus and to come back to that context and come back to it fresh? Because a lot of us have that time pressure or some form of forcing function that's saying, hey, I've got my boss or my teams or my business that needs this, and I need to get it done. Is there a way for us to take care of our minds in these moments?
I think I'm going to answer that in two ways, because I think there needs to be advocacy for yourself and your own health, and there has to be advocacy for the work and for what the client, the boss, the organization wants. An organization doesn't want to spend, or a client doesn't want to spend more having to add more time because there were issues within whatever it was that was built, because that validation process, wasn't done thoroughly, or because it was done too quickly. We hear the terminology is AI slop.
Yeah.
Well, AI slop leads to more time that somebody has to correct that slop, which means more time that your project is now being pushed back, more money that has to be invested so that that can be done. Nobody wants that. So how do we advocate for the fact that we are now creating a society that wants to work and move even faster than it did before?
Mm-hmm.
But we as humans don't operate on that level. We don't.
Oh no.
The computer doesn't have to sleep. The computer doesn't cry when it's reached a threshold of stress.
No.
The computer doesn't need sunlight to regulate its circadian rhythm, or social interaction to help with, the epidemic of loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and how that affects our mental capabilities. So I'd say, on a personal note, like in the moment, you have a decision to make. You really have a decision to make. You can't function as a fully engaged, mind ready, brain ready employee, consultant, whatever you are in this world, if you are lacking your own personal well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And then the implications, like we just talked about, to that client, to that business. Now, the issue is that most people will try to fight through that, because let's face it, that client will be like, you're disposable.
Mm-hmm.
And same with
Yeah.
organizations, you're disposable. We've seen that in the last 3 years, how many people have been just like instantly wiped out. Even the largest companies in the world, we wake up one day and we see the news stories, whoever it was at the time of the day, 13,000 employees let go at once, 14,000 employees let go at once. And I think that embodies fear in people, because it's not an easy time for a lot of people to live in this world that's very costly and very expensive.
Yeah.
And no one wants to lose that income. They don't want to lose their livelihood. So are they going to push through? And if you are going to push through, okay, well, let's talk about some things that you can do. First of all, sleep is a non-negotiable. Non-negotiable.
Yeah.
And I think there's I hear so many people say, okay, I'll catch up on sleep on the week. I'll catch up. There is no catching up. You cannot catch up on sleep. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. When we sleep, though, these like the neurotoxins that build up in our brains over the day, what the brain shrinks to a very small degree to allow those to flush out. So that sort of like hazy brain fog is partially due to the fact that those toxins haven't been able to flush out while you're asleep.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's, first. It's all those things that sort of give us our ability to function properly. Most people, when you're in a state of go, 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 especially those who survive off caffeine, caffeine is an appetite suppressant. So are you nourishing this thing that requires nutrients, or are you a plant that you never water, that you don't give sunlight to, and you slowly watch it wilt and you slowly start to wilt. So those things, I think it's also one of the biggest things, like, if I had that magic wand in the world and I could wave it and give everybody one particular skill, it would be the metacognitive ability. And the metacognitive ability is to be able to think about your thought processes and your cognitive processes in the moment, and to monitor and regulate those. And that goes to not only, I think, your thinking processes, but it also goes to your emotional well-being, your behaviors. It's such a powerful tool, because when you're able to, and I'll give you a really simple example, that it was when I started using AI, when I started using ChatGPT and was, prompting and whatnot, I remember having a very metacognitive moment myself when I was getting frustrated because I was prompting that, like, it wasn't giving me the answer I wanted. I was trying to do all the prompts and whatnot. And 30 minutes later, I'm still sitting there.
Yeah.
And that's the moment that I realized, I'm like, oh man. And that's, I think, this was a while back, and I was like, okay, people, we went from doom scrolling to doom prompting.
What an interesting way to put it. Huh. This makes me think of that 4.0 moment where there was this whole wave of AI psychosis related to these sycophantic models, where they were, a lot of people, their initial turn to ChatGPT was for mental health and helping them get through moments and having these conversations. And unfortunately, the initial model, they have actually gotten better from what I've heard and what I've read and the research studies I've seen. But like that, I remember that 4.0 stage. So this was 2024, beginning 2024. And there was this huge wave of people who were very intelligent people or capable people. And they were like, hey, convince me that I'm not being unreasonable here. And the model was, because of the sycophantic way it was trained, was just reinforcing this bubble of information around this individual. And it made me think of that, of like, okay, yeah, there is this element of AI, of doom prompting, of like, I can go too deep into this and it is not beneficial for me.
No, it's like when everybody back in the day, when YouTube was just coming out, and all the cat videos, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how long did you spend looking at cat videos? I'm like, oh my goodness. Yes, they're cute. I get it. But it's that, this comes back, to a lot of the work that I do, and the things that I'm advocating for quite hard these days, is if no one ever taught us these fundamental human skills, how do we monitor our cognitive processes? How do we monitor and regulate our emotional well-being, our behaviors? No one ever taught us these things. And then we look at the underlying functions of what it takes to be able to do that, which is we need to have a strong attention to focus. You have to realize, that, oh gosh, I've been doing this for too long. I'm in this for too long. And a really simple example, I love using this example because I know everybody has done this at one point. If you haven't, then tell us your secret. But it's, that moment where it could be the middle of the day, the end of the, I don't care what part of the day it is. And you might be sitting at your desk and you're typing out an email, or you're doing something that you're just dead set on getting done, but you have to go to the bathroom. And it's like, I can do this. I'm in the middle of the sentence. Like, I can do this. The amount of people that I give that example to who have that same reaction, they just start laughing. I'm like, exactly, guys. But the mental energy to be like, stop, stop. Where's my physical well-being at this point? This is why everything that sort of in my depository of all the work that I do is coined under the phrase joining forces with your brain.
Mm.
In those moments, you have an opportunity to join forces with yourself, join forces with your brain to make a better decision. And whether that's get up and go to the bathroom, that email's not going anywhere. You can remember your sentence in a minute. It's only going to take you a minute. You can do this. Or recognizing, oh my God, like I haven't had any water. I only slept 3 hours last night. I don't think I've seen daylight for, however long that might be. Okay, course correct. Because then we put ourselves into a state of stress. And low level stress can become high level stress. But it's the sustained level of stress, prolonged periods of stress, which is pretty much your sidewalk to burnout.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think so we've already talked about cognitive load, I think like 5 or 6 times in the context of you're in the field. What's your definition of cognitive load? I'm sure we don't have the same definition. So like how would you describe it to a 5-year-old, to a 10-year-old, something that's layman friendly?
Yeah, I mean, cognitive load it's first of all, it's a theory. When I look at it from the neuroscience perspective, cognitive neuroscience perspective, what cognitive load really means is the capacity and limitations of working memory. So when we look at the process of memory, it's, you've got everything comes in as a sensory perception and then into short term and then into, short-term working. So sensory memory only lasts milliseconds to seconds. We don't process everything. It's what we then give our attention to that then gets into the short-term working. Now, working memory, you've got 15 to 30 seconds if you're not rehearsing. So think of, someone who you don't have your phone nearby, but you want someone needs to give you their phone number. So you're like, okay, just give it to me. And you rehearse. You've got up to 1 minute. 1 minute. If you keep practicing in your head as you walk away, you're like, okay, 416, this is to maintain that. So we see that capacity is really, really small. And, I think, the easiest example is a phone number itself in North America. Why is it the amount of digits it is? It's because they were working within the limitations of working memory. So it's not just only limited by time, it's limited by capacity. Now, I'm waiting for a colleague of mine, because I just saw he put up a post yesterday, and I'm waiting for him to send over the research, because where it used to be the old theory of 7 plus or minus 2, that's how many sort of pieces you could hold in working memory.
Yeah.
His what he posted the other day was it's now down to like 5.5.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. That's not long.
Well, it's not seconds, it's the amount, it's the capacity.
Okay.
Like, so I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. So are we cognitive offloading so much that we're not actually using that working memory? I grew up before I grew up sort of in between the not having Wi-Fi and not having cell phones to having Wi-Fi and to having cell phones. So that example I gave about the phone number would have been, okay, I'm at the restaurant, I'm at the bar or something. I meet someone, I want their number. Not only do I have to hold it in my head, so this is the working memory, right?
Yep.
I have to hold it in my head, but I've got to make it to like a waiter or a bartender who might have a piece of paper and a pen and then interfere that holding that number in my head with that conversation of like, do you have a piece of paper and a pen?
Yeah.
And
that would be difficult.
But we don't do that anymore.
No, we don't. We don't. I imagine myself in that situation. I'm a millennial, and I'm just like, that's not something I was that exposed to, because I had my first phone when I was 12, 14 years old. So the reality is I've grown up with it as an adult. Every single waking moment of an adult, I've always had a phone with me.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine Gen Z with regards to this, where they have never known a world without Like anyone who's born after 2006 has never known a world without a smartphone.
Yeah.
And these screens that follow us everywhere. So that's fascinating, honestly. But like, so from this definition of cognitive load, it makes it easier for us to understand, like, what does context switching do to cognitive load?
Exhausted.
Like, yeah, because like if you're always going from chat A to chat B, like context A to context B, cheese factory to automotive, and it's like suddenly I need to think about milk and rennet and percentages of fabrication and marketing and all things like that, and then I'm thinking about geopolitics and China and how do I get parts manufactured and how do I manage that internally and what is all of that look like. And I guess that is like two so different worlds that trying to put this is kind of like overwriting a hard drive, in that the same neurons need to now switch. And like I'm trying to visualize it in my head. Have the neurons started sprawling out and trying to make connections with everything? Is that what they're trying to do? Or is it just they're saying
they're already there? They're already there.
Okay.
No, I think, you know, in if we sort of like, if we go back to sort of what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation, and we sort of like anchor on the evaluation piece being more cognitively expensive.
Yeah.
And when you think, you know, if there's constant interference is going to mess with you, right? Like that's when, you know, one, like you're saying, one domain can bleed into the next.
Yeah.
And so there could be like misremembered things. You can confuse requirements. You can think something was covered when it actually wasn't, because it was from a different agent or a different domain. So this is when we're going to start seeing a lot more errors increase. What there was a paper, I'm gonna have to find it to reference it, but there was a paper that showed that, you know, AI is not eliminating decisions, it just changes the type, right? So you might be making fewer executive decisions, but a lot more judgment calls, like whether to trust it, whether to verify it, do I override it? And those meta decisions, those like small decisions, those micro decisions can actually be more cognitively expensive. You know, we were talking about burnout earlier as well. And I told you that, you know, I'm currently in a state of burnout and burnout recovery. And the tell for me was I had decision fatigue. I had such decision fatigue. I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't think anymore. And it was just deciding something became really, really challenging. So those meta decisions sort of being like more cognitively expensive, what it can sort of reflect back to us is that AI might reduce the load in the moment, but when you think about it across the full day, especially if you're managing like multiple tools, it can often increase that cognitive demand. So that's why productivity might improve at first, but then it can start to drop.
So like I'm trying to square this with that. The standard pitch from a tech perspective is that these are engineering problems, in the sense that it's crazy, but everything according to them is an engineering problem. And I see, like, building these things, I can understand their viewpoint, because when you talk, when you mention the fact of I need to remember all these decisions, I know people that are specifically working on infrastructure to manage all forms of knowledge. And we were having this discussion, and we were talking about the fact that agents are a forcing function for society as a whole to structure all data. We have already started doing this. Our financial systems and our accounting systems have been structured for a very long time. Our medical system has gotten more and more structured. We've started trying to get things into tables, the great Excelification of our society, right? And AI is forcing us. Enterprises have already started doing this with the cloud era and the past 20 years of what they're trying to do. And now SMBs can start doing this, and individuals can start doing this. And there's, I could imagine a world in 20 years that every single person has a database related to them, which actually stores all of the things. If we think about the digital twin and the agent that follows you from birth, and that has actually all these data points about you. I'm going to put aside all privacy concerns in the context of the conversation, but it's just like, if we imagine that, it becomes this like I do imagine a symbiotic relationship between an agent and a human at that point. So is it really an engineering question? So to come back to my question, to make it a bit more, the standard pitch from all the tech is like AI handles the grunt works, humans do the thinking, and creativity is part of that. But in my personal experience, creative requires struggle. And the insight often comes from like friction of working through a problem. And for example, like when I have an issue that I solve in 2 hours, and I have an issue that I've solved over 2 weeks, I have a lot more satisfaction from the one I've solved over 2 weeks, because I've gone through the entire thing, I've gone through in the entire process, and that's what made it valuable. But what's your take on that? What's your impression? All these things I throw at you, and are the tech bros right? Is it a question of balancing? Are we going through a transition? What's the state of affairs according to you?
Ooh, this is a good one, because I think let's look at it from that sort of creativity standpoint. I remember when people started using AI, and they started to realize that they could create art itself.
Yeah.
The artists were very concerned, like everybody else. But why is it that they were concerned? It's because now, if your art, if their graphics, whatever it was online, it could be wiped. It could be recreated. That took away the creativity process. To some, they were using creativity that was already created.
Yeah, they're rehashing combinations.
They were rehashing. What's really interesting is I went to an art school. They do an end of year showcase every year. I love art, so I wanted to see like what's going on. And this was the first year that I've gone, that I was walking around all of the different exhibition pieces. And it could be painting. It was mostly showing up in the painting and the graphics and whatnot. I was like, oh my God, look how similar this all looks. And you couldn't help but wonder, how much were they being influenced by recreation? And I get it. There's influences, right? Like we see things, we take influence from things, but where has that very, back in the day, if we go back in the day to like, the Van Goghs and the Renoirs and whatever, that was influenced by society, that was influenced by this. They're seeing, things that look very similar, that are being created in a very similar pattern. You talk about creating websites. I see people create presentations using AI, and they're very similar in aesthetic. You can see it, you can feel it, you can, and so are we creatively stunting ourselves? Perhaps. Are we, I'm going to go back to the joining forces. Are we cognitively aware? Can we be consciously aware in a moment to recognize and to look at the things that we're creating with more discernment and say, how much of this came from here, from my mind, from my experience, from my memory, from my, everything that makes me human, versus, oh no, yes, I agree with what that iteration, yes, that was great. Let's just change this, or can you make it more that, like, where's that? So I think it's where is that line between I've offloaded everything into prompting, versus I'm critically thinking and envisioning in my own mind and not just being suggested to.
Yeah. I like this discussion because it very much, it hits the nail on the head of AI is the sum of human knowledge to some extent. It is trained, the corpus of knowledge that is ingested by AI, and the objective that is of all these AI models, at least the frontier labs, are to be a general purpose. Intelligence needs to have all of the information and ingest all of that information in order to produce what they're intending to do. You've got specialized models that try to only train on certain subsets of knowledge in order to become very specialized in those things and very competent and have that kind of framework. But then you have another side of it of someone like, if you look at innovation and you look at the speed of innovation, we always feel like modernity and that is going faster. But I've heard from multiple historians that that's actually a lot more of an artifact of the way we teach history than it is about actual history. And if you look at, like, I remember my history classes in school, we went from the Roman Empire up to the founding of Canada in about 4 classes. And it's just, they're like, okay, sounds good. And in the reality, every single decade is as transformative as the last one, if you are in the moment and you start digging down and you start really scratching the surface and understanding that. Like, I was listening to this podcast that said that Footnotes was one of the biggest inventions ever. And it was just this like technological invention, because suddenly you didn't need to be a master Latin speaker. You had someone who had written a footnote and explained to you what these complicated words meant. And suddenly you needed the innovation of books, then you needed the innovation of books being available, and then you finally needed these footnotes to then go a further step. And within a period of 100 years, you went from only some scholars being able to read to every single medical student. And that's part of the Renaissance and how it went through. So I hear these arguments with regards to it reduces, and I'm still like, what's your take? Is it an artifact of the transition of this, like, we have this new tool that allows us for the first time ever to offload cognitive functions, and we are just, it's like candy, it's like sugar. It's so easy for us and addictive to just feel productive, and we're going to need to find the balance between these things.
Absolutely. I think, as the smart, intelligent humans that we are, we've always found ways to offload to something or someone else, right? It's like, Bob from accounting, you've got this, right? Like, and now Bob's an agent. That's we created the agent. I think, it comes down to, and again, I'm just speaking not from any sort of like validated research or anything. This is just pure opinion. We're in a very, I think, elevated speed right now. When you think about, look back to pre-post internet, the internet just wasn't filled with all of this data like overnight. It took years and years and years in adaptation. It took a little bit longer. The internet came with its own level of fear to some people. We're seeing a different, and I would posit a more escalated level of fear with this new technology, because of the speed at which it has just absolutely integrated and almost inundated so many aspects of our lives, and the narrative that comes with that, which is, if you don't know, if you are not, then you fill in the blank. There's so much of that. We never heard that when it came, from what I can remember. I never heard that when it came to the internet. Oh, if you don't know Google, if you don't know how to Google, then you're screwed. You go buy, say bye to your jobs. We also didn't see, like we were talking earlier, the amount of impact to us. And again, I'm just making this like one comparison between the technologies, is between how many people might have lost their employment, or how, the negative impacts of, we didn't see those until much later. We're seeing the impacts of AI a lot sooner. A lot sooner. And so it's here. It's not going anywhere. Now it's just a matter of, like you said, how do we create balance to ensure that we are still using our own executive function, that we are still the emotional human in this process, that we're not being complacent. And we don't get to those points every day. We're just like, when is this going to end? When is this chat going to end? When is this process going to be over? How much, you had posed a question, we were sort of going back and forth on our show notes here, of when you trust, when you stop trusting, when, there's a big element of trust here as well.
Yeah.
But that's still a lot that comes down to, it's not the system, it's not the process of the AI that's going to make those decisions, it's going to be us.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up, because like trust is multi-layered. Do I trust the agent? Do I trust the AI? Do I trust the human talking about the agent?
Right.
Do I trust the process of creation? And then there's a whole layer of observability and verification. And the fact is, these AI models are grown, they're not built. Like that and that's something that's still, it's said very often, but the layman hasn't yet captured this, in the sense that if you look at an AI, and the way an AI is built is data in, process, math, more or less in one word, AI model out. And then the thing that makes it useful is what we call a harness or a scaffold, which is, it's hilarious to me that all these neuroscience terms are found in AI, because a lot of these founders are from the neuroscience. If you look at Demis Hassabis, if you look at Dario Asmodee, they're both from the neuroscience. So we have all these terminology that have been stolen from your industry, but the reality is, like, people, these are black boxes, and you have this black boxes. If you look at Claude Code or ChatGPT as an agent, or Gemini as an agent, what they're doing is you're asking a question. It's doing either the model is looking at that and it's saying, okay, do I need to use a tool? Do I need to do a thing? And then it's producing the thing, and then it's waiting for you to respond to it. And then there's this big question of trust. And not only that, then you have everybody and their mothers who are saying ChatGPT is amazing, or Claude is amazing. If you're not using this, you're going to fall behind. And it's just like, it's going back to what you say. It's like, do I trust them? And it comes down to the necessity to explore it yourself, that you actually can't trust fully, because these agents are reactive based on the input. And therefore, every single person is a different input. Every single person has a different corpus of knowledge, and every single interaction is unique to that person. And it comes down to, like, my AI and your AI are not going to ever be the same, because you and I are not the same.
Yeah.
So yeah, what's like, there's a neuroscience argument of this, of holy crap, that's a lot of things to keep in a head. There's a question of, you need to go ahead and figure these things out on your own, which, if we base ourselves off of history, is a difficult ask.
Yeah.
So what's your take? I have a follow-up question after you've asked this one. So on agents.
I think about this a lot for myself. I gave you when we were talking the other day, and I said, there's a doctor who I was following on socials. I've been following she's a formidable researcher. She's wonderful. And when she started using AI, noticeably, that had a cognitive impact on me. I was like, do I trust? Like, why do I feel like I can't trust her as much right now? Now, I sat with that, and then I sort of like broke it down. Well, what do I see is she actually using AI for? Is it to respond to people, or is it as a process and a business function? And there's two different. Is it for the human element, or is it for a process-oriented element? And I was like, okay, it's for a process-oriented element. There's an instant message that's sent when you go into Instagram or TikTok, whatever it is, and you're just like, when you say, hey, if you want to know more about this, comment blah, and then it instantly kicks into gear and starts sending things. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. Versus another scientist who started producing their materials solely with AI, and instantly my trust went down. I'm like, and then I started to not only, and I still to this day, to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure that this is an actual person. And I went to go see, like, I looked at their credentials. I started to do a deep dive on like who they are. There wasn't really much about them online. And they had me until one video where it was so clearly AI, maybe in their in their likeness.
Yeah.
But that was when my trust was completely gone at that point.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, if we're going to sort of like do the mass summary of everything that we've spoken about, is we have a moment in time right now that is so critical. And, a lot of the scientists who are working in cognitive neuro right now, they're really, really looking at this impact on children and their development, right? Their cognitive functions, because we're already past most generations that came before us. We were never taught these fundamental human things about ourselves. We were never taught about what our brain actually is, what it does, how it makes us who we are, why do we behave this way, what our emotions are. And we're not saying that everyone's got to become a neuroscientist or, really be into the scientist, but a very fundamental level of like, here's the basics about how the operational system works so you can work better with it. If we're not learning that, and if we're not trusting ourselves first, then how are we not just going to blindly give away our trust to something that makes us feel good and that has the answers for us all the time? And so it feels like it's like, oh, you're such a big help. Thank you so much. When really, when you sit back and you're like, oh, but I'm really exhausted now.
Yeah.
I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? Well, how many hours did I spend having a conversation or, reiterating or doing whatever? So I think that's where the balance is going to come, is taking this moment in time. We can't push pause. There's no pause. No one's willing to push pause on any of this right now. But at the very least, we can start, like you said, sort of waving the white flags of, I don't really know much about how I operate as a human being, but I've invested a ton of time learning about how this works.
Yeah.
Just flip the mirror. Just for a moment, flip the mirror.
Yeah. I saw this, and it probably will scare you from a scientist, neuroscience point of view, but AI. So put a child, 4 or 5 years old, in front of ChatGPT voice mode, and they are exceedingly content because they can ask any question and get a patient response all the time. Calm, patient, does not get annoyed, and will keep answering questions for as long as the child wants to ask those questions. There's two levels of this question. The first is, what does that child become 20 years down the road when they've had this since pretty much their first memories? And these are the AI native generation.
Yeah.
And then what does that actually do? Is there a way we can do this safely? Is there a way we can use these tools and use them as tutors? Because we have had these situations for thousands of years that the richest among us teach their children through tutoring. They every single subject, if you have an interest in any subject, you get a tutor that's a specialist in that. And AI, by all definitions, is a specialist in almost all subjects. It loses the human aspect of it, which is very important. And I'm not saying that this replaces one-to-one, but it is certainly a nice addition comparatively to something like YouTube, which is a one-way communication. What's your take on those two levels? So what do they become, and what's the impact, and what's your take?
My instant reaction is like, that makes me sad. It makes me sad. First, from this aspect is, if you're constantly going externally for the answers, then how are you developing your decision-making skills? How are you developing your rationale? How are you developing if you're constantly giving those answers? That being said, there are scientists and ed techs and who are building these models so that they help to develop metacognitive ability. And it has to go beyond, right now, a child who's just asking, they won't know if let's say they're talking to whatever it is, how often is that going to reflect back to them? Well, what do you think about that? Or why do you think that was working like that? Or how I'm like, I've never had my any of my prompts or my in the chats that I do, I've never had them come back to the chats, come back to say, what do you think about that, Lauren? I'm like, oh, I've never seen that. Now think about a child whose brain is developing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a grown adult. My brain is fully cooked. Still rewiring with things that I learn and still but I'm like, oh my goodness. So I think there's a little bit of fear and sadness that
Mm-hmm.
if they're consistently offloading into it, and I think this is why there are scientists right now who have gone in front of the US State Senate, they're petitioning in the UK. And I think we're also seeing they're having to take steps back because there's a correlation between when technology came into the classroom, the diminishing cognitive abilities. And
Mm-hmm.
why are we in this day and age having to now petition for cell phones shouldn't be allowed in the classroom, or you should only be able to have your cell phone at a certain age? Well, if there wasn't a fear that we weren't developing our own minds, our own brains in the same ways anymore, and we're actually seeing diminishing effects, then how do we create the balance? Like we come back to again, is how do we create that balance? Which means, are we using the best of what we know now about cognitive development over the lifespan?
Yep.
To then build these programs to create an agent who at least is not so biased and so self-gratifying.
Yeah.
That we do create those spaces for creativity, for challenge. Learning is challenge. Learning is hard. What makes us human in the learning process is the fact that it's hard.
Yeah.
If we
I
take
see
that
that.
element away, we're really doing ourselves a disservice.
It's one of the things that passed through my head while listening to that is just like, I wonder what we're going to say when the first agent that has been persistent for 50 years celebrates its 50th birthday. What does an agent who has had billions upon billions of conversation and remembers every single one of them with perfect accuracy? What would an agent like that say in 50 years? We're in 2075 and it just celebrated 50th birthday. There's no answer to that. We're so far into this future that has accelerated that there's just too many variables. But it's just like, it makes me think there's the human aspect. And we need, and I hope that the reaction as a society to AI is actually, let's use these and offload certain elements, these processes you talked about. But let's also use this as an opportunity to use this time to reconnect with humans.
Absolutely.
And find more time.
Absolutely. I think we have such a loneliness epidemic right now in the world. People are, and this, probably started before the pandemic. Pandemic escalated this. And you can see in certain places this other narrative of, we're not pendulum swinging hard, but even here in Toronto where I am, I'm seeing there are more of these events popping up, a lot more of these events popping up that bring people together. There's spaces now where technology is not allowed. These these reading rooms, and there's reading bars, where it's like, come, sit, read, have a quiet conversation with somebody. So I really think that we're in a space right now where there's enough people who are recognizing that this connection to one another is so critical. So critical. One of my friends who is a cognitive neuroscientist, Dr. Ben Ryan, he wrote a book, an excellent book. I'm going to plug it because it's so good. And it's called Why Brains Need Friends.
Yeah.
Go get it. Go read it.
I'll put it on the screen as well.
So great. And it's just such a wonderful, beautiful synthesis of not only the neuroscience and the research, but stories of what it means to us when we connect with somebody and what it means to them when we connect to somebody. And we'll never, do you know what? I'm going to be as bold to say, I hope we never get to a point where we truly feel like we can just have that with a device.
Yeah.
Because until the day that this can shed a tear,
Yeah.
or can laugh or can shrug like you did, you know, I'm still I'm gonna choose us. I'm gonna choose us, you know, and just be aware of the fact that technology is not going anywhere. It never has, it never will. We're just gonna have to learn how to blend. But in this very moment in time, like I said before, we got to really learn about us if we're going to preserve what makes us humans humans.
I love that. I love that. I'm going to change gears because we're a bit more going towards the end, and I really want to change gears with regards to, we had discussed in the previous conversation that there's this whole human aspect where we need to reconnect with ourselves and we need to be there and we need to make sure to be conscious of our cognitive load. And then there's a whole aspect where AI can actually be useful. You mentioned with regards to process versus human, and this, I love this question. I'm trying to ask it to as many people as possible. But if you had the opportunity, like if someone gave you an agent that as a business person, you know, you've been a solopreneur for almost a decade now. You do these talks. You talk to people about thinking. You talk to people about their cognitive capabilities and their cognitive load and the whole science behind that. The problem is balancing that with the necessities of running a business, of doing the taxes, of making everything run, of sending messages to strangers so that you can engage in conversation with them. Like, this is like, there is this balance point, and it's clear that everyone, would you use the agent? So far I haven't received a no, but it's like, what's your criteria? What's the point at which you say, yes, this agent is good enough, is aligned enough with my values to be used professionally at scale in a way that is aligned with my reputation? What's that barometer for you?
I mean, you're asking somebody who's like, you know, in recovery or burnout right now, if you take something that would help you make decisions. My answer is yes.
Of course.
Yes, please. You know, yeah, absolutely. If I could go get my groceries for me too, that'd be fantastic. But I think what, you know, even in the conversations that you and I have had about this, and like I said, I would treat it as an experiment. There are certain things that I'd be very comfortable with just letting an agent take over and handle. Those processes that I don't have time for.
Could you name a few, actually, just like off the top of your head?
You know, we were talking about the series that I produced. It's an online course, essentially.
Yeah.
But I have so many other elements to my business that don't, you know, that's the one element that doesn't really require me, but I haven't put in a system so that it can just sort of like run an automation in the background. So yeah, absolutely. I would take that and run with that. Would I use an agent at this moment in time? Would I experiment to do outreach? Maybe. And it would be an experiment because all of the things that are coming into me that are very identifiable as this was AI that did it, this is agent, are so generic and so soulless. And it's like, hi, Lauren, we see that hey, Lauren, we saw your post on, hey, we see that you combine neuroscience and learn. I'm like, OMG, like, seriously? It's just it's like an instant delete.
Yeah.
Instant delete. Delete. And I think that would be my line, right? Is how I don't think that, and again, I'm very sort of analytical when it comes to something. And I read these to go, did you just scrape something from my website or did you scrape something from my LinkedIn post? And you're just saying enough versus I think I can actually hear a human being in here.
Yeah.
More of the human being. So Absolutely. And I'm open to trialing this experiment with you, right?
Yeah.
And say, okay, like absolutely help on this side of things, right? But
Yeah.
when it comes to, I think we can sort of tie this into the previous like conversation, when it comes to the connection part, that to me still has to be very authentic, right? And how I communicate with people has to be that very authentic part. So
Yep.
I don't think we've gotten there yet. Because if we had, I'd probably be on the phone or on Zoom calls like all day, every day,
Yep.
trying to figure out what's
Yep.
what. But and then there's, you know, from the other side of it is someone like you comes to me and says, "Hey, Lauren, I'm going to build you an agent, and it's going to help to take care of like, oh, you know, you've got this course, it's going to do all of these things. You can learn in the background. You don't have to worry about it, but I do have to worry about it." Because anyone who's an entrepreneur and anybody who's a solopreneur who's like basically lives, breathes, and dies with their business,
Yep.
it's just another thing that, again, now we're going to the cognitive load. It's another thing I've got to think about, right? Is what's it doing? Is it doing the right thing? And like, you know, how much do I need to know about that in order to not have to come to Simon every other day with a new question about is this thing's running? How do I know? So I then have to add a layer to my own education, which do I want to?
Yep. Agreed.
Or, and then that sort of bears the question is, and again, because we're seeing new roles pop up, so you create the agent, but then who's monitoring it for me? Well, I don't want to do that. I've got enough to do. So who's doing that? So I love the idea.
Yeah.
You know, but then it's like, okay, where's the team of Simon?
Yeah, no, and I'll share like exactly my experience on this, which is really interesting because I've done experiments. I've sent on average every week between 1,000 and 3,000 messages across all surfaces, not just my business, but other people's businesses. And there's a few rules I've realized. Personalization doesn't work because personalization always falls bait to this thing that you've said, which is there hasn't been any empathy. We haven't yet trained the robots to be empathetic because, well, empathy requires shared constraints, I'm going to call it. So the need to eat, the need to sleep, the need to talk, to be loved, to be like, that's where empathy, in my opinion, comes from. And robots don't have that. They're just doing factual statements. They're rehashing factual statements. What does work is humor, is jokes written by you and then done en masse. Because it doesn't need to be personalized. It needs to break through the noise and say, this is the person I am. I'm willing to send a joke as the first thing you see because you probably don't have enough humor in your life. And there's something profoundly human about humor. So that's the first tip. So tidbit, if you're doing personalization at mass, stop it. It doesn't work. You've heard it here twice. It does not work. Use a joke. Figure out what's funny to people. Test things out and find something that's funny. And the second thing is AI. I've learned this because I used to make dashboards for people for their AI. They were never visited. Never, ever. And so what I started doing instead is I asked the person, where do you live? Are you a text message person? Are you a WhatsApp person? Are you a Signal person? Are you an email person? Are you a bit of both? What do you prefer to have the recaps once a week in email and the daily stuff and when you need an action by text? Is that the right balance for you? Most people it is. It's like AI is not an app like other things should be. It's more of an underlying infrastructure layer with regards to the millions upon millions of decisions being made by humans every single second. And it's finding that balance point is something that is in motion right now. And we're not yet arrived at a point where we're saying this is the right thing. But I do feel like we're going towards a balance. I don't think we're going to get there for another few years, though. Like this technology is new.
I think that's reasonable, you know, and I think that's, you know, that's logical for, you know, and it sort of almost brings down that little bit of anxiety of like, oh my God, I'm missing out. I'm not keeping up. This isn't, it brings down that little bit of anxiety. I think the thing that is lesser spoken about that I know people still think about is that we also have to take into consideration that something could go horribly wrong and this could all be shut down. The plug could be pulled if something went horribly wrong. Things have already gone horribly wrong.
There are situations.
And so in the realm in which we're speaking of the stakes being quite low to humanity, help me with my business processes and let's do good by creating websites for nonprofits who can't afford them. And the stakes are quite low, but there are stakes that are a lot higher that could still have that ripple effect down to all of us. I hate to even to vocalize this, but we just saw the Artemis mission, and wow, what a feat of science and space navigation and just how far NASA has come and everything. I'm not gonna lie, there was a part of me that goes, a lot of this is being run by computers. I'm like, I'm sure there was a movie about this somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, I think, like I said, there is still that lingering, what happens if something does go, what happens if?
Yeah.
And we can't live in that fear. We definitely can't use it to sell or to do whatever. But I think that there is a sort of a balance of reality, which is in the event, it's the same thing that we thought about when the internet, really started exploding.
Yep.
And I don't remember when it was. I think for a hot second, the internet was down across the world or something. And it was the world didn't end. It was okay. We found ways, you grabbed a piece of paper and you wrote something down. It was, it was okay. But it's not only how it can help our businesses, help our processes, help education, help the healthcare systems, all of that. But what are we going to do in the event that something does go wrong? Are we prepared in the human skill of all those things that AI was doing? I think that there's a really cautionary tale here is if we don't actually learn the things that we're offloading to it, and all of a sudden something goes wrong, what happens to the ecosystem?
It's a good question. I think it's always good to look at the worst case in order to be not only prepared, but to just have schemas in place to think about these things. It's my personal feeling is just we're living through another Manhattan Project, but this time it's public. It's not something that's maintained by a single entity, it's a single government, and thankfully I'm quite glad that it's a bit more of a unfortunately, I don't think we've yet arrived at the point where public discourse is sufficiently being realistic about the implications of this. I would love to hear more lawyers, more doctors, more people like you talking about these conversations and having these deep conversations about what is the impact of AI for me as a specialist in my field. I would love to hear an astrophysicist or a vacuum physicist who's very, very, these people are extremely specialized. And I would love to say, can you apply your brain power and your expertise and spend a week thinking about the impact of AI in your field with an expert or with something? And I think that I would love that to be the next step, because if we're pouring out $650 billion right now into data centers and probably untold trillions into the implementation. So a sizable chunk of world GDP into this thing, yet we're not having these discussions. Just talking to other humans about, hey, what does this mean for me? And if we do enough of those conversations, I think we can arrive at something that is better.
Yeah. And so, I agree. One of the board members of Learning Pirate, Stefan Ledane, he is working with organizations right now on topic of governance, because it's really been the Wild West.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that not only the implementation and the application within the organization, but the governance of it, which is lesser spoken about. People have moved so quickly to implementation, they haven't thought about how to govern it. And at the end of the day, you're still liable. Your laptop isn't going to get up and go to court to defend itself. It's you. It's you. It's the organization. So I think that's a very critical topic that needs to work hand in hand with the implementation and the processes and how we're strategizing it. It's also, how do we govern and who's responsible and what does that look like? So I think, yeah, I agree with you. Like from a legal aspect, it's still definitely the Wild West. There's no governance. There's small wins in the court systems right now, but I think that's going to be the next responsible step here.
I think that's a wonderful place to let it off, because that's it's a good positive thing. Is there anything you want to plug, Lauren? You are an entrepreneur. You do talks. You have a course. Go ahead, plug yourself in, please.
Oh gosh, I'm the worst at this. Okay, joining forces with your brain is actually a course that you can take. That's an interactive, there's fun experiments in it that will help you learn about your brain and learn about learning, which is my domain as a learning scientist. So I'm going to plug the crap out of that. If you're a parent, if you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you're an employee, all you need is a brain and the desire to learn a little bit more about it. And if you've enjoyed this little interaction, all you get on the screen is basically this. It's me doing silly, ridiculous, like scientific things with my friends.
I love it.
Yeah, go check that out. No, I think my closing message to anyone who's really listening to it is just with that circle back is never underestimate the power of you and how remarkable the human brain is. We are still, despite all the technologies, the brain is still the most complex thing on the planet. But it's the most remarkable and fascinating thing.
I love that. That's a great message.
Mm-hmm.